Hello and welcome to Let's Talk on LoveworldPlus. My name is Elizabeth Okugo. Today we'll take a look at combating the new waves of international terrorism in Africa. Recently, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon declared at a high-level meeting of the Security Council that nothing can justify terrorism, citing challenges in Nigeria, Mali, and the broader Sahel region, where he said terrorism was feeding off extreme destitution and undermining developments through violence, intolerance, and human rights abuses. He welcomed the Council's resolve to tackle the challenges head-on and said he counted on the international community to unite in advancing this important work. The question is, how has Africa braced up for this new wave of terrorism spreading across parts of the continent? These and more we will analyze in today's edition of Let's Talk. And with me on set is Barrister John Bekeme, a legal practitioner, consultant, and social political analyst. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us today on the show.
We're
looking at the spread, the terrorism, international wave, how it's been spread right now. And the first question is, now that these terrorists and extremists are exploiting the social media network, and they're causing radicalizing people and also spreading threats and hate. Do you think the African governments can, replace the call for terrorist narrative with the messages of peace? Do you think so?
Yes, if they want to replace the radical activities of terrorists on social media, if they want to do a replacement with peace and other kind of forms of campaigns to rein in the forces of terrorism, okay, they can if they want to. But the question is, would they really want to? Because the social media is there, its impact and influence around the world is enormous. Yeah. And the terrorists have been able to realize the advantages of the social media in carrying out their campaigns and activities.
Exactly.
I think it is only rational and justified and proper that the African government should also take advantage of this tool. Already, you have a lot of governments in Africa that uses the social media networking, to campaign, to sell their candidacy, their personalities and all of that. So I think they should go beyond that. They should go beyond using the social media to highlight their perceived achievements and policies and all of that.
Okay, now you're talking about the government.
The government, they should also use the platform to campaign for peace, another form of activities that can be carried out on social media that can help them to rein in the forces of the terrorist activities. Okay,
can you give us, an example of what one of these, strategy in using the social media? What can the government actually do? You talked about their campaign and all that. For example, just give us an example.
Now, let me tell you something about social media. A lot of things you see on social media is virtually information. People put the information they want the world to see. If you're sharing a photo, it is what you want the world to see you put on the social media. And then the world responds to what you put there. So I think in a nutshell, what the African leaders need to do is to put what the world needs to know. The challenges of, for example, we can actually have campaigns on social media advising people, especially young people, because they are the highest users or consumers of social media. Okay. You can actually have campaigns on social media highlighting the reasons why people shouldn't participate in so and so activities, in terrorist activities. Okay. Such campaigns can include that such activities are criminals, they are unhealthy to the society. Whatever form of information you can provide to show or enlighten the world that terrorism is wrong, I think the social media is available. The government can put such information there for the world to see. So while the terrorists are putting their own information, there is a broader information that appeals to the rational mind in respect to what is right, doing what is right, and refraining from participating in anything that is negative and unhealthy to the society.
All right. So talking about giving the right information, using the social media. Networking sites to also crack down terrorism. Okay, the next one I would like to ask is, you know, there is a growing concern and recognition that terrorism cannot be defeated by military force or by law enforcement alone. Now, tell us, do you think there are other strategies that can be used to crack down, you know, or to fight terrorism?
Yes, I think there are. But before I come to that, if you look at terrorism generally, terrorism is it's a crime.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, you have different criminal activities. It's a kind of a novel criminal activity that employs force and violence to propagate its message. And then if you look at terrorism and crime generally, terrorism thrives most in certain societies where ignorance is high, where unemployment is high, and where poverty is high. Let us take a look at, take the world into perspective, for example. Terrorism does not thrive much in Europe because Europe is developed. The people are more enlightened. If you look at the countries or areas in the world where terrorism is very much in force, these are the places that has the most poor people, the most ignorant people, the most unemployed people. So I think military and law enforcement is not sufficient. Government should go beyond. Why we have the military and law enforcement on ground to tackle the areas it can tackle, it is also necessary to look at other palliative measures. For example, let the society be more enlightened. Government should look at what it can do in respect of creating more employment. Because there is a saying, that there is this popular aphorism that an idle mind is the devil's workshop. So when the mind is idle, the devil can plant anything on such a mind. But when the mind is active, is occupied, is engaged, is busy, it is very difficult for such a mind to think of doing negative things. So I think some of those palliative things should be things that can occupy the individual, the people in the society.
Okay, you're trying to say, you know, analysts have argued, they've emphasized that creating job opportunities for people will help to also fight this. Now, as an analyst, you're also pointing out these, you know, bringing out these points. Now, you're trying to say that poverty is also a cause of, you know, terrorism, or would you say that it's about religious extremists? What are you trying to point out now?
You know, when you're looking at religion extremism, sometimes you can hardly alienate it from poverty. You know, they used to say, most times it is true that a hungry man is an hungry man. You understand? Religious extremism is part of it. But if you look at some of those people, the so-called religious or religion extremists, how many of them, those that carry weapons, that do the kidnapping, the killings and all of that, how many of them are working class people? How many of them are people that are above the poverty level? A lot of them, a lot of them take advantage of religion to do whatever they are doing. But if you look at the background, if you look at the field personnel they use in perpetrating the activities.
Okay, yeah, you're talking about this ones perpetrated. Then people, analysts have said that there are some sponsors, there are people who actually sponsor.
The sponsors, they don't do the field work. The field work are done by mostly the people that, if you look at the categories, the categories they belong to, they are below the poverty level. Okay. These are the people that it is very easy to manipulate a poor and an hungry man. When a man is poor and he is hungry, you can manipulate his mind easily by flashing a few currency in front of him. Okay. And, you know, he is obliged to do what you want him to do because you're paying him to do it. You know, people pay people to perpetrate violence. The so-called sponsors, they don't carry the guns. You don't see them on the streets. You don't see them carrying out the actual nefarious activities. You understand? Yeah. So I think poverty is one of the causes. Then religion extremism. You know, when you're looking at the aspect of religion extremism, the people, the clerics in certain religions where you have extremism, very, like some religions are very popular in these areas. The clerics who teaches the religion, they are hardly the physically violent people. But you have those whose mind has been made up. And sometimes when people's mind has been made up, it's a series of activities, occurrences that, something leads to something. They used to, there is a saying in the legal profession, you cannot build something on nothing and expect it to stand. So if the wrong information has been built in the right person over a long period of time, such a person is bound to exhibit the trait and character of that particular information that he has been built with over a long period of time. So I think some of those things are the indirect causes of this religion extremism. When people have had the wrong information about what their religion teaches, because as a person, if the society's definition of religion is right, that religion is is a relationship between man and God. If that definition is right, then I don't think a good religion should encourage one man to kill another in the name of God.
There's something you were emphasizing on, the mind. These people, you would also say that poverty is a mindset. Because these people, if the terrorists, if their minds have been disabused or they get the right information, it's not just flashing, coins to them that will make them stop.
It begins with the mind.
Yeah.
Like you say, poverty is a state of the mind.
Yeah.
You understand? But in changing that state of mind, actually, you don't need money to change the state of mind.
Exactly true.
But if the state of mind remains and is persistent, then it is easy to manipulate with money. Because the mind has to be changed first. It's a mentality, it's a process. It's not something that happens in a flash. You understand? So the money aspect only plays a role when the mindset has not been changed. Once the mind is changed, is transformed, that person is bound to respond on the basis of the new information that transformed his mind. That is what we form the basis of his response to whatever he is doing.
Now let's take a look at, let's go to Mali. Now, what's going on right now? The religious extremists, Islam is trying to take over the terrorism in that country. How would you put that also? Would you attribute that to poverty or just the religious extremism?
Well, like I said earlier, the two of them goes together in most cases. Mali is one of the poorest countries in Africa.
Okay.
And then, there is something about religion that you need to understand. When certain people in the society, when they want to get something and they cannot get it, most times they use religion as a shield to becloud the thinking of other people for them to be able to get what they want. In Mali, certain people want to take over power. And then they have not been able to. Now they are using the platform of religion and all of that. But like what I was saying earlier, the society's definition of religion and the actual activities of these people is not consistent with each other. Because religion is not about violence. It shouldn't be about violence, about using violent means to get what you want. So in Mali, like I said, it's one of the poorest countries, and because the poverty is prevalent in that society, it is easy and very possible to use religion as a tool to manipulate the minds of some people. This is how it goes most times. It is easy to point to, for example, a man who is poor. It is easy to tell him that we are of the same religion, for example. This other person who is in power is an infidel. He is not a believer. And because he is our ruler, he is responsible for the hardship you are facing. Because their religion teaches them that if somebody is not a Muslim, such a person is an infidel. So when such a person is in power, or the person is not in power, but there is a rapport between the people in power and people in other countries, more advanced countries, like the Western countries, whose way of life are not in strict conformity with their religious belief, then they believe something is wrong. So it is easy for them to say, oh, it's because so and so person is doing this, that's why so and so person is facing so and so challenges. But a lot of times it's a tool of manipulation that these people are using to arrest the minds of other people for their own selfish desires and aspirations.
Okay. Now, you see, these people, they're set in their ways. They have this particular mindset, the terrorists. Now, they recently were saying that the UN Secretary Ban Ki-moon is actually, you know, he's saying something that nothing can justify terrorism. And then, you know, international communities are trying to intervene in this thing. Do you think that something can come out of it, you know, out of this, the international intervention?
Yeah, something can come out of it, but it's going to be a bit palliative. But if you look at the history of the world generally, the world is not going to be more peaceful today than it was last year.
Okay.
If you look at modern history, we have had different wars. This is a phase in the current world. This is a phase, terrorism and all of that. For certain people, it is a means to an end. So whatever the UN is doing, there are going to be some results. But I am not sure, I am not certain yet, judging by the past, from what has happened in the past in terms of war and conflict around the world, I'm not certain that there is something that can be done by the UN that can completely annihilate the issue of terrorism from the face of the earth.
Now, okay, you know, the need to prevent and suppress the financing of terrorism, you know, we're still looking at international intervention here. Now, it has been underlined as well as placing individuals and entities on sanctions lists where necessary. Now, do you think that this is a practical approach? Will it work within the African socio-political terrain?
Well, to some extent, if we can lay hold on the individuals that are financially behind these activities, to some extent, because when the terrorists, when they are starved of cash, there is always the tendency that their activities will not be as serious as it is. But the issue is this: they are, apart from the few individuals that we are aware of, that these people has been, there are some sanctions and all of that, their means of financing is broad. Okay. Some of their finances comes from the corporate world, indirectly. Okay. And then you have corruption, because corruption is one of the ways these things thrives. Then you have all those money laundering of 18 and all of that, which also thrives on the basis of corruption. So if you're placing individuals on sanctions because they are supposedly behind terrorism and all of the financing of terrorism, it's a good step, but it is not sufficient. It's like placing a pin to cover a sinkhole. It won't do much because there are basic things that leads to all of these things. For example, these individuals, you've succeeded in placing them, in blocking them. But how about dealing with the issue of corruption? Because most of the monies that comes from corruption, one way or the other, they end up in the hands of the wrong people.
Yeah, one thing leads to another.
One thing leads to another. So it is not sufficient to put these people on sanction. The only thing we can do is to, like an holistic approach, trying to deal with the issue at its root, from the roots, from the beginning, which is corruption. The corruption, the unemployment, the ignorance, the poverty, you know, these are some of the fundamental causes of these issues we are looking at.
Okay, now the link between technological development and security has been highlighted. Do you think our governments are ready to invest in technology, you know, looking at the fact that they do not have a reliable database?
Well, from what we have on ground, I wouldn't say the governments, they don't appear to be very ready to commit the right funding for the right technology to fight crime. Because from what is on ground, let's take a common issue, example. A lot of times we hear about robberies in Nigeria, and that the armed robbers, we are using more sophisticated weapons more than the police. This has been an occurrence for many years. And so far, we've not had a change a lot of times you see policemen carrying guns on the street and all of that. You look at the guns, most times they are very old-fashioned guns and all of that. But technology is beyond guns. So when we're looking at, I'm just giving you an example. So when you're talking about the right technology, like you mentioned, the use of database, it is very fundamental. There are a lot of other technological applications that we need, or a society needs, to fight crime.
Can you mention one?
Well, when you talk about one, for example, in advanced countries, they have satellites. That can monitor designated areas or specific areas. And they have invested so much in this. And then you have the database that is very active, that is very, very like it's alive. In such countries, when they want to trace an individual, in terms of like tracking them up, they can track them and all. It is very easy to do, But so far, we don't have most of these things. Even the few satellites we invested money on, at some point, some disappeared from the orbits, some crashed and all of that. And after that, we've not seen anything. Even at the time before they crashed or disappeared from the orbit, we didn't really have any information as to their relevance. So I would say so far, the government, they are not demonstrating any commitment to show us that they are ready to commit the proper funds in the right places when security issues are concerned. Okay, now lastly, can you just say what's the way forward? What is the way forward? The way forward is simple. If you want to change a man, you need to change his mindset. There is no way you can change a society without changing the man, because the society is made up of people, different people in a, different people, a group and all of that. And then they are exhibiting different characters. So if you're looking at changing a society, it begins with you, an individual. One, the individual has a role. So we're not just waiting for the government to come and change us. I need to improve myself, develop myself, change myself in the direction I think is proper. Everybody has a role. Also, the government has a role, because even when you say everybody has a role, there are some people that will never make a move until they are told to do so. This is some of the places the government comes in, the groups and all of that. And then the government has to be serious in tackling issues like employment, poverty, corruption, anything that is like a canker worm eating into our national fabric. The government has to be committed to tackling it. Lip service is not sufficient, because some of the things we are hearing now, there's a publication, a newspaper publication. I shared it on my page on Facebook like 2 years ago, when in 1985 or 86, the then government of Nigeria were saying 1986 is the deadline for power outage. We are still hearing the same thing in 2013. I think
we need to wrap up because we're running out of time, and it's been less talk, and we have been talking about discussing how to combat the new wave of international terrorism in Africa, and we're discussing with a guest here, and he's been very useful to us on the show, and that's all we can take on Let's Talk today. He said it all, that governments should invest in changing the mindset of the people, and also in propagating the right information. It is very vital. That is one of the sure ways to fight or tackle the act of terrorism in Nigeria and also in other countries in Africa. My name is Elizabeth Okugo, and it's been a nice time with you, and hope you enjoyed this episode of Let's Talk.